speaking of good, should we get this pantomime horse of a podcast underway, or should we mess around a bit more?
Let's get underway. Why not?
All
We've
right,
got
let's get
lots to
underway.
talk about, so let's get started.
All right, Mete. Well, you've had a busy old week, so what's on your list for this week?
Well, I want to talk about a college hackathon, which I was at on Tuesday. That was really good. And
Mhm.
then I went to a university teaching and learning conference. They're a KnowledgeFlow customer, so I'll share some of what happened there. That was good fun. I also want to share some client feedback, which is really good and lovely. And I've got a question to explore, which is AI conscious? So that thing that's
Crikey.
come back again. So that's on me. What about you? What have you
That's
got?
really interesting. So just to pick up on that immediately. So one of the things I read this week was that the number of philosophers being hired by AI companies has massively gone through the roof. But they've gone straight to university departments. And there was a guy from, I don't know which university it was in the US, complaining that philosophy departments are being pillaged by by the AI companies because they want to hire these people to think about the way that their models answer questions and how they react and how they behave. I was gobsmacked.
My
Who'd have
word.
thought that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Who would have thought
Anyway,
that?
so yeah, philosophy wasn't on my list, but what was on my list was some some marketing feedback, things about data. We've talked about it in the past, but I'm sure we'll keep coming back to it as we will today. Fable 5, of course, is back on the agenda for a
Yes.
limited time only.
So
So
unless
let's
you've got
talk a
lots
little,
of money.
unless you got lots of money. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I also wanted to pick up on your hackathon thing, and maybe we should start there because you did another hackathon. You've done several of these things now, and I've
Oh.
never been to one. I've heard you talk a little bit about them, but I just wondered whether, for our audience, whether it would be useful just to explain what's actually involved, how does it work, how do you get the most out of them, what can people do to prepare, and actually how can they really help them with what they want to do with their AI and their AI strategy.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, happy to do that. So I think firstly, our what we describe as a hackathon quite often is more AI strategy than a hackathon, which is interesting in its own right. Because I think that's more a measure of where people are in thinking about AI. They're still kind of like, can I help with that thing? Oh, yeah, can. And then you kind of end up more widely talking about, at some point, nearly always about kind of, what is the future of AI in that job area and those things, which is fun. But typically our hackathons are we try and get sometimes we do a day where or 2 days I've done where we have different teams coming for periods of those days, which is quite a good model. Start with the senior team and then bring in individual teams to work on their thing. The key is, of course, like all good facilitated events, is to have the people in the room who do the work, who are going to be the people that need to learn a little bit about how AI is helping them and how to use AI to its best effect. And people that really understand the process and data, of course, which is the real key to all
Mm.
of it. So I kind of found myself at this hackathon in the main listening to sort of workflow planning exercises. And my angle always is like, okay, so what data are you drawing on to answer that question to move that piece of work down the process, and therefore can we use that data within KnowledgeFlow? The thing that makes it really exciting and does make it hackathon-y is because the customers nearly always have KnowledgeFlow already,
Mm.
and we know KnowledgeFlow enables us, the team, the devs, or indeed any of the kind of prompting team, to create instantly new assistants, pretty much live, if you like. Then we can actually do some stuff in them, and that's been my favorite one. I think was marking. In fact, it was in a college that wasn't this week, but that was in a college where one of the participants said, I have to go because I've got to go and mark 30 BTEC Unit 4 blah 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 assignments. And I said to her, can you just wait 10 minutes because I think we might be able to help. And it was about half an hour in the end where we grabbed all the marking materials and scheme of works and marking schemes and etc. from the awarding body's public website. So we indexed on those, We then did a bit of prompting to create strictness that you needed and the structure that you needed, and then asked her if she would load, because it's secure student work, and then ran that, and it was probably 2 or 3 tweaks, and she was absolutely blown away. It was very impressive. But doing it really quick means you do miss some bits, and marking
Yeah.
is notorious for being overly generous in marking. So whilst we're in this rabbit hole, if you're ever building AI for marking, you've really got to work hard on structure and strictness. The structure being, if, and this was a real live example, one of the things that you had to do in this BTEC thing was evidence of a diary, and that had to cover particular things. And on first pass, KnowledgeFlow decided that there was a diary because there were a number of date entries with things throughout a 30-page student assignment. There was no diary. You could not, if you were looking at it as a human, that does not constitute a diary.
Yeah.
But because smattered amongst it was enough things, it had basically congratulated them on their diary and said it could have been better if blah, blah, blah. And the way around that is to structure it so that it has to answer that question on its own from the section entitled a diary. And if there is one, they're great. If there isn't one, then you don't get the marks. So hackathons, the real key is the workflow. I did one for another organization recently, and I think I might have mentioned it before on here, but I think they got as much value out of just workflow mapping what they do as they will get from the AI solution that can now do that for them, or at least support them with that. So it's that kind of team in the room, get them talking about what they're doing, talk about the pain, talk about where the data is that they're using in each case, or the templates or the rules or the policies or whatever the kind of, the data really is. And then typically we can create, for most things, for most workflow, we can create AI that will do a whole lot of it normally. One of the challenges with them that you have to watch out for is that you get little pet hobby horse areas. So you'll get something that helps one person save an hour a month maybe, and you're like, okay, that's really, and you don't know that as an external. Someone starts sharing with you, this is a big challenge, and the word game changer I've heard from more clients. Will be a game changer for our sector, and so we get excited and build something and put a load of effort in, and no one else is interested.
Yeah, that's right.
So
we've done that quite a few times, been responsive to people and done stuff. I can think of 2 examples that I've initiated where I've said, oh yeah, these people are really keen, and then they go, yeah, thanks very much, and then they do nothing with it. It's like, why is that? And I wondered whether it comes back to this, does it actually sit in the workflow, or is this just a nice addition to stick on the outside? Oh, look what AI can do, it's really cool, but then actually go back to the day job because they've got a pressing deadline or someone complaining or something kicking off elsewhere in the forest.
And data analytics and predictive nearly always seems to fall into that trap. And it's one of the hardest things to do well in KnowledgeFlow, because you have to add data dictionaries and rules, and often some help with the joining, because their common identifiers aren't necessarily as identical as they should be. So there's lots you do in there, and then you get to the kind of point of it, a really amazing functioning natural language query tool, and then they go, oh, I don't really know what to do with it. They don't say those words, of course, but you're saying, right, what do you want to ask it? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Ask it how many cases we've got. And you go, right, great, you got 200. Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, thanks.
What is that it? So yeah, it's I think starting at the end is key for all of these things. Is what's the, what are we actually trying to achieve, and is it worth it? Frankly, is it worth the effort? So
yeah.
So that was good. So hang on. So on that though, tell me about your gift of feedback you had this week. Then your
gift of feedback. Yeah. Feedback is a gift. I don't know who said that. Someone famous probably, but yeah. So I had some feedback that some of the content that I've been putting out is rubbish, and it's like, and specifically, it's just the feedback was it's rehashed, it's lazy, and it's rehashed stuff. First of all, I didn't think it was rehashed, and I'll share this with you because I don't know if you've ever read an author called Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett, for our audience, very funny man. Discworld, yeah, and he literally wrote a book called, I think it was called Soul Music, which was all built around the final line, which was there's a guy down the chip shop swears that he's elvish, and it was entirely but for this one funny line, which anybody you have to be. I think you had to be alive in the 80s to know that. I think it's Cyndi Lauper song to be relevant. Anyway, I'd created this and it was a reflection on my holiday in Scotland. I was thinking about that and some of the stuff that I read and I talked to you about last week. But there was one line in there about there's a lot of noise about water being used for data centers, and actually it's nowhere near the amount of water being used on American golf courses. And my line was, let that soak in for a minute. And I thought that was hilariously funny. And that's so when I got this bit of feedback saying that my content was lazy, and I was thinking, they're really interesting. Okay, so that's your opinion. Everyone's entitled to opinion, and actually I shouldn't change my entire approach, my very humorous approach, of course, to content. But it made me wonder about what people actually want, and actually what do people find useful, and actually we can't, I can't tailor everything I do to appeal to everybody all the time. I mean, you can't please all the people all the time is a very well used saying for a reason. And actually, and it reminded me of this podcast where we've had some feedback from our audience that it was really helpful with his insomnia and sorted him right out. I think was the exact phrase. And we don't necessarily do it for him. We do it for us, and actually, it's helping us think things through and talk things through. And so that was really interesting to me. What should I be creating in order to help people with their journey? Which is partly where the hackathon question came from, really, because I think that's a really interesting, simple idea. It's just good old-fashioned facilitation. It's good old-fashioned workflow. Actually, how do you use the tools to fix the workflow? It's not necessarily about the magic technology. It is about actually how do we practically help people with their dull, difficult tasks that actually stop them getting on with their day job. So yeah, really interesting bit of when I first read it, it was like, oh, it's a bit annoying having some negative feedback.
Well, no one likes to see negative feedback, but equally it's supposed to be very good on the socials, isn't it? It drives much more engagement, particularly if you have an argument about it, but I've never done that.
But yeah, my life's a bit short for arguments on social. I'm not a convert to social media. I came to it very late, and I only do it because I work as the honest truth. But I find it really challenging. I don't really want to know what people have had for their breakfast, or where I find it really, and especially with LinkedIn, you get more and more of that now. Here's where I am on holiday, and here's the things that it's not work related actually, and I've been much more diligent recently about hide this advert or unfollow this person, and why is this person coming up in my feed? I'm really not very interested, but it's definitely listening to me, Kieron, because there's been a few times recently where I've like, hang on a minute, I just talked about that, and now I'm getting a bloody advert.
That old question of are they listening and feeding that in? Who knows? The hackathon thing I should share with you just for amusement, really, although it's kind of depressing amusement, it was a college, and one of the two hackathons that we ran there that day was on trips and visits and risk assessments when you take students out of the college on various trips, and the process is so awful. And it is so. First, I mean, I'm not obviously going to go through all of it, but you first have to kind of like find out how you're going to how's the transport going to work, and then where are we going, and what is the risk there. Apparently, they were saying there was something. What happened? They were walking along this beachfront on the kind of promenade, but if you wanted to walk on the beach, it was now going to be high risk, even though it was like effectively walking next to where you were, and that would involve a whole different set of paperwork and more scrutiny and sign off. But it goes, and some of it, I mean, it's good in lots of ways because it's protecting people and stopping people getting hurt, but there's or whatever happens. But they've got things like you have to do this. What's the transport risks, and then what's the kind of risks of being there and then getting back again? But then you have to look at that via each of the students and the neurodiverse challenges or additional needs that they have. So you have then individual versions of things within all of it. Get this, this was amazing. Their data process, although they weren't sure whether this was just an invented thing or was actually in their policy, because everyone was like going to say, who wrote that? you have to collate all your contact details for the students, so emergency contacts and things. You're not allowed to take that piece of data with you in case you lose it. It's considered too high risk because it's got personal data. So they have to call. So if something goes wrong, then they have to phone back to the college to get someone to access that file and tell them whatever it is information that they need to know. And but it's absolutely bananas, and they're not allowed to they're not allowed to carry it with them. She's so crazy. And then the checklist for the morning is a 3-page A4, 3 pages of like checklist, like a table. So there must be like, I don't know, 100 items you've got to tick on there to say that you've done all this and all that's done. And no wonder, guess what? People don't really want to take the students out on trips and visits because you spend about 3 weeks doing the paperwork.
You spend 5 times as long doing the paperwork as you do on the bloody trip.
We
I mean, I
completed
get it. We need to safeguard students and all of that good stuff, but common sense has to apply, doesn't it? And there's got to be a better way. Got to be a
Well,
better way.
and what we're trying to gun towards with AI added to that is, I mean, it's obviously really important not to take the human out of that too much, because I guess the act, although I suspect most of them are copied and pasted now, but if you were starting from a fresh start, then it is a useful thing for the teacher on the trip to have a think about what the risks might be. That's probably going to be the most useful part of any risk assessment, I would argue. A bit like project planning, actually, the art of creating the plan is the thing that makes you think. After that, it's kind of has some use, but much less. So I think designing some AI that's going to help them with, well, here are similar things, and maybe a step-by-step approach that asks them, but then kind of enhances their answers with like, well, there's 2 other things you probably haven't thought about that you might want to build into your thinking. That kind of approach maybe, rather than just doing it. Because it occurred to me sitting in the room, we could build an agentic version that literally just writes the thing. You dump the files of, what you know about the trip and who's going, and let an agentic model create all the paperwork for you.
Yeah.
But I think the risk there as a workflow is just no one's going to look at it.
Absolutely. No, they're just going to press the button and say, well, I did my bit, and that's the wrong thing to do.
Which is probably what they're really doing.
Well, yeah, indeed. Yeah, they're forcing it through paper rather than through technology,
exactly.
I guess.
Exactly. And the checklist, at least, you have to tick, rather the rest of it, presumably copied and pasted stuff. But anyway, I'll update you once we build some. I'm now just waiting for some data from them on their previous assessments, and then we're going to build something that will help.
Excellent. Well, a college hackathon wasn't the only educational experience you've had this week, was it?
Oh, no, indeed. Well, I had a trip to Lincoln for our university clients teaching and learning conference, staff teaching and learning conference, where we were talking about KnowledgeFlow, and they have had KnowledgeFlow now since September, I think. And
so, wow.
Yeah, coming around for that. So it was a kind of, how are you finding it? What you how talking a bit about how it works again, and reminding people of that, and inviting further thoughts on areas we ought to tackle with it. But interestingly, so they did a piece where the person after me, who's one of she's sort of the, I guess, key lead champion, does training and trains the champions and organises the AI champions. she asked people in the room. She said, "Right, who here has logged into KnowledgeFlow?" And probably about 2/3 of the audience put their hand up, which was good. I was like, okay, well, that's all right. And then she said, "And who here has found KnowledgeFlow helped them, or did it hinder them?" And I'm standing up.
Did she let you know that question was coming out of advance?
I'm on stage going, "Holy moly!" And I'm delighted to say that it was exclusively that it helped them, and they weren't these. The interesting thing with the university clients they are some of the most skeptical about AI. I think there's an academic challenge that academics don't like. Musicians, I sense artists have a similar kind of immediate, this stuff is awful. I see a bit of that, in music media. Academics, I think, are a lot like that as well. It's all about cheating, and it's all about not being rigorous and diligent. So it is a tough audience. So to have nobody say it was hindered them was really good. I'm sure if you poke between the lines, there'll be a couple of people that will find things, I'm sure.
That's right, yeah. If they knew you were on stage and they didn't want to embarrass you, but hilarious that she didn't ask you, she just dropped you right
No,
in.
that's right.
Brilliant.
I was like, oh, good. And but that was really good. And then I was also asked by the Vice Chancellor was meeting with the CEO of Guild HE. So Guild HE is one of the I guess a professional association, a professional organisation. I don't know how you'd quite describe it for HE. They have 70 universities in their group. And Dr. Brooke Storer Church was the person that was there. But I got a phone call from the Vice Chancellor and said, Kieron, are you on campus? And I was like, yeah, I'm just meeting with someone of your team right now. And he said, could you come over to wherever we are? Because I've got the CEO of Guild HE and we were talking about AI and we figured, why don't we actually get someone that knows what they're talking about? And so I was like walking towards this thing, at first I was like, yeah, I'm on my way. And then as I got closer, I was thinking, this could be really challenging. Where's it going to go? I know nothing. And so that was really good. I had like a half an hour kind of a bit of briefing on KnowledgeFlow, what we're doing, and the importance of some of the things that we believe in security and human in the loop, and really focusing on what are you trying to achieve rather than how do we make AI work here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was good. I liked it.
Excellent, excellent. And speaking of feedback, I hear that we had some
Yes.
other feedback. We have a customer called Raven Housing, and I don't know if I can mention them, but I have now, so I'll cut it out if we're not allowed to mention them. They've got KnowledgeFlow.
They do. Hey, look at that. Good segue. That's right.
Nice.
And so we had our first proper check-in, I think, really, after they've probably been about 3 months so far, maybe a bit less. And I think that the way they're doing it is a really measured and thoughtful approach to bringing AI to the organization. They've really thought hard about KnowledgeFlow. We had lots of conversations with them prior to getting it in there. And she has purposely taken a view that we should not launch with everything that we could. Because as you know, a lot of the time we'll launch with all assistants live and let people kind of find their way. And some people find things that they find useful and we see usage. What we're doing with them is a very measured, starting with policy and then moving to repairs next. Anyway, the feedback. So the usage of theirs, like in total numbers, isn't amazing. Like, in our lists, we look at them and they'd probably be in certainly not more than, they might be second bottom quartile, but they're going to be low on our list of overall usage overall. But what's really interesting, she was absolutely raving about how amazing it was. She was like, this is so helpful. It's saving so much time and getting much better answers. And that's the kind of key to this, I always think, is yes, it should make time a bit easier for the really dull tasks that you don't really want to spend your time on. But really, the focus is on consistent, high quality answers that everybody can now give, because it's not just the person that knows all your policies that can answer well. Everybody can do that. So that was really, really useful. But it led me to the thought that and we talked about it on here before, but measuring usage versus measuring impact it's that whole kind of, I remember one of our customers where they use Copilot, fine, good, so they should if they want to, good personal productivity, and they use KnowledgeFlow for the agentic style and indeed just the specialist tools that you don't have to try and gather loads of documents together in order to get Copilot to give you an answer. And the Copilot usage is higher than KnowledgeFlow, not massively actually, which was quite interesting, but higher. And I was a bit annoyed when I heard it sort of presented alongside each other, because it feels like we're losing in that competition. But of course, the reality is what those prompts are things like summarize this document, help me with this email, all that kind of stuff, as opposed to KnowledgeFlow, which is like trawl through all our policies and find all the times that we mention AWAB's law in this housing place and make sure that we've got it all properly worded in each case. And the kind of difference in what you can achieve in one prompt is phenomenal. So I think just reminding ourselves that we should not be about token maxing and focusing on getting people using it. We need to keep focused all the time on what's the impact and what actually matters to the world of tenants and students and children who are in care. There you go.
Interesting. So I think, I don't know anything about it, so I'm surmising that if they had lots of conversations before choosing to go ahead and then making sure that whatever they did do worked. They must have invested quite some effort in making sure that their data underlying it was structured and sensible and fit for purpose then.
It is important, isn't it? As I know you are
Yeah.
about to talk to us about with your challenge this week, or not, on
Yeah.
customers
Well,
expecting a lot.
it is a bit that. So that whole kind of what's structured and unstructured data, how is that used? And come back to something that we've talked previously about is the context, and actually the context being king piece of actually, unless you understand the context, it's just words or it's just data, and it doesn't make any difference. So really pleased to hear that someone is really thinking that stuff through, because we've got another customer in my part of the forest where they're like, yeah, and could it do this huge massive thing over here, and could we lob all of these documents and pictures and images and recordings in? It's like, well, according to Donald, yes, you can, but unless you've got some kind of, what's the purpose? If it's just to kind of create like a really big pool that you're just going to dip into now and again, it's really not going to help you. So yeah, I've got some challenges on getting them back on track. And actually, what's the thing that's going to make the difference? Come back to something we said probably 20 minutes ago. Just creating solutions is relatively easy. Actually, whether those solutions are any bloody good or make a difference, I'm sure they're good, but whether it makes a difference there on a day-to-day basis, it's really you've got to think about stuff before you actually do it and invest a lot of time. And I know that we've done that with quite a few people. I don't want to do it with this particular customer. I want them to get it right, because it's important stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? All of that kind of, how much effort is the data worth? And it's back to that. It's what we talked about hackathons just now, I think. Is what's the ROI, to put it in sort of that terminology, of if AI can do this in a tenth of the time, half the time, whatever, then is it a time saving, or is this a problem with quality and consistency that you need to fix? What is it? And I think getting people clearer on that earlier is helpful, because then it is like, is it worth data wrangling or not?
Yeah.
And AI is very good in unstructured data, as we know, but there are still 1,000 little bits that will trip you up if you're not aware of them, and actually putting time and energy in will get you over a whole bunch of those things.
Yeah.
I was just building out this coming soon to colleges, agentic quality assistant. And what it's going to do is, in colleges, after they do their self-assessment, which will be about now and running into September, they will then write a quality improvement plan, which each department will have one, and then they'll write a kind of Uber one. I want to be able to take those departmental quips as a shortcut and then load them into KnowledgeFlow's index, and then have director of quality, let's say, load the current college data, attendance, performance, handing rates, whatever, and then instantly identify all the things that are going well against the quips, all the things that are not going well, and whatever else you need to know, and then write a notification, and ultimately, potentially, in time, just send the notification directly to each of the quip owners to say, this is where it's going for you this time, well done, or it's not working and you should think again. But to do that well, what we really need is to take each quip and pull out everything that is a sort of target. They write smart targets within them. So we need to pull all those out and put them in one spreadsheet, and then index on the spreadsheet and the quips, because that will give the narrative background. And my question is, are they going to go, I'm not doing that, it's a load of admin?
Yeah.
And that's all about what's the prize. Because if the prize is quality improvement that's always on, because you don't even have to load the data. If this is really good, we can have the data API'd into it, or assuming you can run APIs. Not all the MLS providers allow that, but assuming you can get the data in, this thing could just happen on its own. It could just nudge you every time something's changed, for good or bad. But it will depend on, is the prize worth it? I think it is, because anything that drives quality improvement is a wonderful thing for student outcomes, but it will require probably a not massive step, very small step, probably, just to copy and paste those smart tags. We could do it for them using KnowledgeFlow, but they need to own it to make sure it's up to date, I think. There you go.
Making the effort is the tough stuff, isn't it? Is it worth the price? Yeah, good question.
Yeah. I think that's where we need to keep people focused, isn't it? As we go more hackathons, more strategy. I think that given Microsoft just announced their AI implementation company, I can't remember what they called it, Microsoft Frontier or something. There's something to do with Frontier in there, and that
Oh, really?
is all
I
about
haven't seen that.
helping. Yeah, it was last week's announcement, I think. So, but they're all about they're putting a few $1 billion in. I think I've read 6,000 staff to be recruited to it, or probably moved over from another part of Microsoft, I guess. But
Wow.
it's all about helping organizations adopt and embed AI and building it with them, alongside them, etc. So it's all the same challenge everyone's having. It's like this shiny new tech can make a massive difference, can definitely completely transform the way we work, and therefore student outcomes, tenant outcomes, etc. But it takes a bit of effort, and no one wants to
Yeah,
hear it. They want to do it the old way, get the old papers out, put it all together, put it in my own spreadsheet with all my gaps and my odd column headings and my misworded things, but I don't care because that's my spreadsheet.
yeah. That's
So,
my job. In fact,
yeah,
I was reflecting with somebody the comment you made, I think it was last week or the week before, about, most people just want to go to work and do a good job and then be told they've done a good job and then go
yeah,
home, and they don't want to really think about actually how do I improve this. They don't bring an entrepreneurial mindset, I think was the words that you used,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
to the approach. But the fact that Microsoft are invested, I knew that OpenAI had
yeah.
invested a lot of
And
money in
Anthropic
there.
have one.
Yeah, and so yeah, the fact that Microsoft are going down that route as well is really interesting. But it just demonstrates the scale of the adoption challenge, doesn't it? The fact that they know they've got to throw billions of dollars at it in order to try and recoup some of the billions of dollars of um, invested in getting the whole AI infrastructure and ecosystem up and running. Because if they can't get people to use it, then there's going to be some real challenges, as we've touched on before, with people not using the tools. That's an interesting. I hadn't heard that, but it's an interesting segue into my final point that I wanted to raise
Yes.
this week, which was Fable 5 is back on the menu, even if for a very, very short time. And I've only had a chance to play with it today, and it's really interesting in the way that it challenges and pushes back, but actually is really quite smart. And it did a couple of things which, I gave it some what I thought was quite a tricky challenge. And it did this little thing where it said, yeah, but if you could just give me a little bit more detail, or could you add in, kind of this, could you give me a spreadsheet of that? And I'm thinking, this is partly how the shadow AI problem kicks in. And you went to an event a couple of weeks ago, I think it was at the Ealing Learning
Partnership, yeah.
partnership, thank
Alliance.
you. Sorry,
Alliance,
yeah,
yeah.
Alliance, big problem. And the audience, 67% of the audience were worried about shadow AI. And actually, it's that whole kind of, it tempts you in. It just that kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
could
Give
you
me a
just
bit
tell me
more
this?
data.
Give me a bit more information. Give me a bit more detail. It's a bit
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it felt like I was being scammed. It was like that
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
hey, can
Just
you
put
just
your
give me your
PIN
PIN
number in
number?
here.
Yeah. Can you give me your inside leg measurement and your mom's date of birth and everything else? It's just like, am I being scammed? So it was interesting to me going through this process with Fib. I mean, it is super powerful, but it also made me think about, I thought originally about it being a 3-tier world, but actually it's probably a 4-tier world. So you've got, Fable is great, but it's going to be put into this highly
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking
expensive
Max. Yeah, the
tier.
Anthropic's Max model. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to have those companies that can afford the full Max version. Then you're going to have people who are doing effectively kind of where we're at with the sort of private stuff. Then you've got people using the free stuff, and then you've got people not using it at all. And one of the conversations I had this last week was with a CEO who was, I'm like, if you don't do this stuff, where's it going to leave you? Where's your competitive edge going to be? If your competitors are doing this
Yeah.
and you're not, or if you're choosing to tinker around the edges, where does it leave your competitive edge? And I think it's tough for lots of people because they're not seeing the instant productivity benefits. But again, come back to some of the things that we've talked about in this conversation. It's not necessarily about the ta-da magic bullet thing. It's actually, let's go through the process, let's go through the workflow, let's go through the data, let's go through what's actually really going to make a difference,
Yeah.
rather than the kind of the magic wand stuff. So yeah, really interesting, the whole Fable thing and where it's going to be leading us, and the four-tier hierarchy. I don't know whether that's the right terminology or not, but it just feels like for those people who just haven't engaged, just don't want to engage. I get it. I was a bit like that with social media back in the day, but now look at me. I'm writing content that's
reluctantly
getting, I'm getting trolls telling me it's rubbish, which apparently is an accolade. So
there you go. It's all going very well for you, I feel.
Terribly well.
I don't think I've had any hate mail on mine just yet, but no doubt.
I wouldn't go hate mail, but yeah, it was an interesting little wake-up call. Right, speaking of little interesting wake-up call, I've got one final thing to finish on, but I'll let you go. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on this week?
Well, AI consciousness. Well, I must touch on that. That is a wake-up call, but I thought you were segueing again with your tremendous segues.
Do you know, it's just because we're so witty, Kieron. We haven't even realised how good we are at this podcast stuff. I'll share this with you. I bought a book on saying why 75% of podcasts fail. It's in the post. I'll read it and I'll tell you why. But I think we already know. Well, we could have written it.
Yeah. Well, you can't fail if you don't set out to achieve anything, which is largely our plan. AI consciousness, so it was back in the news again last week with now, I think Anthropic are actively monitoring the mood of Claude, its changes, apparently. So that's really interesting. I haven't delved into it look at me, using AI words. But and
AI too much these days.
And there is now funded research, I think, from the Frontier companies, Frontier Labs. I need to look it up, really. I saw it and then didn't bother writing down the references as usual. I was more, this is our in the pub style podcast. You don't bring all your references to the pub.
No, that's right. Yeah.
It'd be a bit dull if you
bring your crisps and your lager.
There you go. But interestingly, so and the question is back to that kind of, actually, there's quite a lot of, the Turing test has been smashed, and there are new versions of that now to try and accommodate LLMs. But could it be conscious? And there are a lot of people, including myself, who kind of almost dismiss that out of hand, of like, it's a computer, don't be ridiculous. However, I did a psychology degree, and you'd have to be able to define consciousness first if you're going to dismiss that nothing else has it. And it has been impossible so far for psychologists to define what is the mind and what is consciousness, or indeed for anyone to define it, really. Scientifically, at least. So who's to know? Because on a physical level, all we are, or our brains are, which is where we assume our consciousness is electrical signals passing through neural networks. And guess what's going on in computers? Ooh. So I think it remains an area which I find kind of fascinating, in that kind of, really third beer in a pub kind of conversation, as opposed to on stage. But it's worthy of keeping in mind, and worthy of us more put your brain to think about it occasionally, I think.
Well, a couple of things. One is I always joke with my family about when things go wrong and things get emotional. So no wonder things go wrong. We're basically bags of meat powered by chemicals and electricity. So no one.
Lovely.
Yeah, when you think about it like that, it's not very gratifying or edifying, is it? However, the thing I did want to finish on, and it's a little bit of a trailer. So tomorrow we've got a special guest pulling up a bar stool and coming to talk to us. Yes. And one of her big topics is neurodiversity. So again, if we'd have planned this bloody podcast, we could have mapped out that segue, but it was beautiful in the way that we did it. Because we hadn't planned it, but that's where we're going to finish on. So a little plug for a special guest on our podcast coming tomorrow. So as soon as that's out, we'll let people know.
How exciting. We're getting joined in our pub podcast. I guess I hope they're bringing a tankard.
I think we said we'd get the beers. It says that. You pull up the stool, we'll get the beers. So
we'll have to get a tankard down for them then.
Excellent. Well, in that case, I'll see you tankard in hand tomorrow.
Nice one. Good to talk to you. Have a nice one.
Right, chap. Have a good one.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye.